Hey everyone, welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best horror movies of all time list. I think after 15 or so episodes, I've finally gotten that down to something that makes sense.
You did it.
Yes. My name's Clay, and with me is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And we have a special guest with us this week because the movie we're talking about, I think at least between Amanda and myself, it has the potential to just turn into an hour to an hour and a half, or arguably anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, depending on how much we're feeling it. Just saying great things about this movie. So I wanted to put a little bit of spice in here, although it's not exactly like our guest doesn't enjoy the movie and is going to hit us back on this. But
it is true.
But a friend of mine, Tony McMillan, he's a writer and artist, and he has a comic book that he writes called Serious Creatures, which is a fictionalized story about the special effects movie special effects industry in the 1980s. So it's like right in the pocket of the era of the movie we're talking about today. Tony, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's nice to be on the podcast. I love this show.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we're glad you're with us.
Thank you.
And the movie we are talking about is 1982's John Carpenter's The Thing, which, we could probably pack it in when we're done with this, because I don't know if there's much to talk about outside of this, because we've hit the apex. But the number on the list, on the Thing's number on this list is 138.
Absurd.
It has an 84% Rotten Tomatoes score with an 89% adjusted score. Now, you've obviously both seen this. I've seen this. When Tony, what was your first experience with The Thing? That sounded weird, but you know what I mean.
Well, it involved my mom, which is even weirder. I actually think that my mom, when I was like maybe 9 or 10, she knew like Alien and Aliens. I was like, what else is like this? And even though it hadn't hit its resurgence yet, she was like, oh, The Thing is like, if you like Alien, you're like The Thing. Kurt Russell's in it. And I think I saw Big Trouble in Little China before that, and so I knew who Kurt Russell was. I was like, cool. And I remember watching it on VHS and just it blowing my mind as a little kid. Like, it was just so cool, and it became I didn't realize it was it wasn't a big success at first. I just thought it was like up there in the pantheon in my mind of Alien and Predator and all these great sci-fi horror films, and of course it is. But and that was, I was born in 81, so this is right in like 88, 89, 1990.
Well, it's interesting because 1982 is actually, you said that it wasn't very well received. 1982 was a good year for movies that nobody liked at the time.
Yeah.
Because you've got Bladerunner, you've got The Thing, you've got Dark Crystal, you've got Tron.
Oh, wow.
Conan the Barbarian, although that was pretty popular at the time. But it was the King of Comedy. It's a lot of really interesting movies came out that year. Halloween 3 is 1982, so yeah.
I'm with you on that one, Amanda. Like,
I don't disagree, but it is one of those movies where it tanked at the time, but now everybody seems to love it.
It's found an audience, definitely. Yeah.
Amanda, what about yourself?
I had in some ways the opposite experience that Tony did, and in some ways a very similar one, because I didn't see The Thing until I was I was like dating Greg already, like with my husband.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he and maybe even you or some combination of our goofy group of friends are the ones who sort of pushed this movie upon me. And I remember seeing it, and like, I obviously love horror movies. And when I watched it for the first time, I was like, I had that same feeling Tony did, where I just sort of assumed it was up there in the pantheon, and that I had this huge blind spot my whole life where I just didn't know about this movie that everyone knew and everyone knew was amazing and loved. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that it kind of is maybe now you wouldn't call it a cult classic, but it was for a long time. It was sort of like a niche thing.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, moved from cult classic status to just regular classic.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's interesting how I don't know exactly how you can track that change. But it feels like it's been fairly recent, like with maybe within the past 10 years or so, where the Thing has really, I don't know if it's just people of like the tail end, I guess the tail end or tail begin, the oldest group of millennials and the youngest group of the generation before that were right in the pocket for this kind of movie. And as they got older, then that started becoming a movie that people talked about more. I don't know how this stuff works, but it does. John Carpenter across the board seems to be someone who has only really started to get recognition that he deserves within the past 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it's funny now, like his biggest imprint on people, it seems to be his music style, actually, in a lot of ways.
Right.
Like I mean, you done some synth scores for your Batman show, which have a little bit of Carpenter in them. His imprint, his thumbprint is so big on that, and it's such a weird small part of what he does, but like it's unavoidable. And I think you're right. I think it goes hand in hand. John Carpenter and the Thing kind of being elevated to mainstream acceptance. It's been in tandem, and it's in a way it's his biggest failure and his biggest success all in one.
Right. It's I would love to know how he feels about this movie and his career in general, seeing as this movie essentially, from what I know anyway, basically broke him
Really?
mentally when it came to movie making. Cause he thought this was going to be his big breakthrough movie, and it just did not go well at all. And after that, he really soured on Hollywood and movie making in general. He's always been kind of a curmudgeon, but it feels like after the Thing, he kind of never really recovered from it. But
yeah, I wonder if there's been some vindication now for him, where he's like, "Ha, see, I was right. It is the best movie."
Right. Yeah,
I feel like it was his Pinkerton, man. You know, like
yes,
in a weird way. But yeah, I also wonder. Yeah, his whole career trajectory was thrown off because of it, and I always wonder. It's got to be so bittersweet, because I'm sure he was proud of it and is proud of it, but it took everyone else so many years to follow up, and now his career is. I mean, he can never go back in time and have the opportunities he would have had if this was a success.
Right. Yeah. Well, we should finish the paperwork before we can jump into the movie proper. So we'll take a quick break, and then we will jump into John Carpenter's The Thing.
Mayday. Anyone hear me? Over. This is U.S. Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside. Where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
You guys gonna listen to Gary? He can beat one of those things!
All right, The Thing, directed by John Carpenter, written by Bill Lancaster, based on the short story by the short story is called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr., starring Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, Keith David, Gary from Gary's Old Town Tavern, a couple of other Hey That guys, and no women.
None.
Amanda, would you like to tell us what happens in this movie?
I would love to. In remote Antarctica, a group of American research scientists are disturbed at their base camp by a helicopter shooting at a sled dog. When they take in the dog, it brutally attacks both human beings and canines in the camp, and they discover that the beast can assume the shape of its victims. A resourceful helicopter pilot and the camp doctor lead the camp crew in a desperate, gory battle against the vicious creature before it picks them all off, one by one.
Mm-hmm.
That sums it up. So some things you will find in this movie include oscillating workplace power dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
cinema's single greatest defibrillator scene.
It's a long list, but this one is probably at the top. Yes.
Baffling nose rings on older men.
Mm-hmm.
John Carpenter sound-alike music in a film directed by John Carpenter. Acing the blood test while failing the Bechdel test.
Mm-hmm.
And questionable dog parenting.
Questionable dog parenting.
Full credit for all of those goes to Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for supplying those for us this week.
Questionable dog parenting is definitely high on the list of my all-time favorites of these that we've rounded up.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's still under the same tent, so we have not fallen off yet.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking something similar to that, and I was like, is husbandry the right word? That's not
animal
the right
husbandry.
Word. Yeah, questionable animal husbandry.
I mean, Clark does love those dogs, and he's very
true,
close
yes.
to those dogs, but I don't know.
I relate to Clark the most of all characters in that movie.
Yeah,
Ooh.
being unintentionally untrustworthy just by looking kind of weird. I identify with that too.
Yep.
So let's just cut to the chase. Number 138. What the hell's going on here on this list?
I don't fucking
It's
know,
hurtful.
man.
It's hurtful.
I don't want to oversell it or anything. Not that we haven't already, but the fact that this isn't like in the top 10 for me is just blasphemy.
So this list, though, I mean, it's constantly changing, right? So
Yes.
I wonder if like 5 years ago, when the thing was like hot again, was maybe it would have been, or maybe 5 years from now, I don't know. Like, although I feel like the Stranger Things bump should have helped it for the kids.
Yeah.
But although that stuff like bugs me. When like, the kid has a poster of the thing in his like wall, and he's like 1985. I'm like, nah, you wouldn't have a thing poster. Dude. Like, there's no way.
Historical accuracy, damn it.
I know. It's like, the kids also listen to The Clash. I'm like, dude, you're like in Ohio, and like I don't think you're listening to The Clash. Like, you're not that cool.
You're
I'm sorry.
9 years old.
Right. It's Van Halen, and that's it. It's fine.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This. What's interesting about this, watching it this time, that I hadn't thought about before, because I've never really sat down and like kind of analyzed this movie. But since we've been doing the show, Amanda, you and I have both kind of discovered we have a similar taste in the way we like stories to be told.
Yes.
And this, I think, is a masterclass in that style, in that it is a masterclass in necessary detail.
Yeah.
I think it gives you only what you need. Like I've watched this movie, I don't know, 25, 30 times in my life. I have no idea what they are researching in Antarctica.
That's a really good
point. What are these guys doing there?
I think it's like smoking gigantic spliffs and watching old game shows, and what that does on the human mind. And
more importantly, does it matter? Like, would the movie be improved if you knew what they were doing there? No, right?
No. And I think the remake or sequel/remake/prequel that came out a few years ago kind of made the mistake of going a little too far into what they were researching at the because it takes place in the Norwegian outpost. Right. And I think I'm pretty sure that it kind of deals more with like what they're surveying, what they're doing, that they're taking ice core samples and they're doing this and that. And I don't think it really adds much to the actual story.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I there's actually a TV version of John Carpenter's The Thing that has a voiceover which describes each character and what they do at the research
No.
facility. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read like excerpts of it. I was like, what? Like, yeah.
I discovered, because I think you or somebody else brought that up on the chat while we were watching it the other night, and I have that version on my Blu-ray set. I didn't even realize I had it.
Oh my
So I
God.
went back and I watched the first 10 minutes of it, and it's so strange because it's there is just this disembodied voice. It's not a voice from anybody in the movie. And
Oh.
as each character shows up on screen for the first time, it sounds like this voice is just reading the stage
script
directions
notes,
from the script. Yeah, so it'll be like, MacReady, helicopter pilot who's adapted to living in the Antarctic,
Oh
but
my
he's
God.
just starting to really feel, and it's just like, what the hell is going on?
Windows. Hates being a radio operator. Hates being here. Can't wait to get back to the States. MacRady, a top helicopter pilot, worked for Hughes Aircraft as a test pilot until he got into a confrontation with top management and resigned to take this assignment. Childs, a mechanic who went from trade school to the airlines. None better. Gary, a 30-year Army man who worked up through the ranks to become an officer. Likes the job of station manager. Clark, in charge of the dogs, doing a study on the effects of extreme cold on animal behavior. These men were commissioned by the United States National Science Institute to gather data concerning the physical and natural sciences on the continent of Antarctica.
So
And
it's
it's
even worse than the Blade Runner narration. At least they got Harrison Ford to do
Yeah.
that.
It's like my only theory is that since it was on TV, they were like, because the first like 10 minutes of this movie, there's not a lot of dialogue in it. And I have a feeling that whoever was preparing it for TV was like, they don't even say anything for 15 minutes. We need people, anybody who's watching this is just going to do something else or change the channel unless we give them something, you know?
I like to think that the voice is actually the voice of the thing itself. Like, he knows everything about everybody, and he's a really shitty like fan fiction writer kind of guy. And it's like, and ruggedly handsome MacReady doesn't suspect that I will kill him soon.
There is
everybody likes the thing.
Oh my God.
He's the best.
Total Mary, yeah. The thing's the grooviest. The thing knows everything. But he's very clumsy and
very endearing.
Right.
Now,
MacReady has a secret crush on him.
Oh my God. There isn't actually like a really interesting there's a short story that a sci-fi writer wrote, I think in like 2011 or something, called The Things. And it's the thing from the thing's point of view.
Oh, really?
And it's much more cerebral. It's this kind of, like it's almost like a thought experiment masquerading as a story, but it's interesting. I recommend people check it out if they're really into sort of the fandom of this movie.
That sounds great.
Yeah. But yeah, still going off of the necessary detail element, there's some things in here that I had never really thought about before stylistically that really go to amplify how much you get out of so little. One of those being the constant use of fade outs at the end of scenes, which seems a little bit strange at the beginning of the movie because they do it in some slightly odd places where it's almost like they're going to go to commercial. But as the movie goes on and things get more tense and it becomes more about letting people out of your sight, these fade outs allow for missing time between scenes in order for your mind to kind of go crazy when they come back. Like there's a really prominent one where MacReady and Knowles go up to MacReady's shack and they do a fade out, and when they come back, the next thing you see is Knowles coming back frantically to the station saying he had to cut MacReady loose because it was, he found his jumper or his underwear or whatever.
He found like burnt clothing. Yeah.
Right. And this is all stuff happening in between these scenes that they faded in and out of, which creates this space where something could have happened that you didn't see. and it's a really subtle way to build that tension and amplify the paranoia, I think.
I think John Carpenter, he gets pigeonholed. People just think of him as a Halloween guy, and even that, he's really more about suspense and kind of classic.
Oh, definitely,
creepy. Yeah. He's not about. Even though this film is his goriest film in its own way, he's more about like old-fashioned techniques of building anxiety and tension, and that everything you're mentioning right now is so masterfully done, and so it's almost really eloquent. Because you don't have to show anything, and when you don't show it, my imagination is speculating like nonstop. I was really impressed. Actually, I kind of caught that too the last few times I watched it. I didn't really think of that as a kid. As a kid, I was all about splitting dogs and
right,
and awesome beards. But now, now I can see.
Yeah, where the movie kind of gives your mind the space to work on itself. Like your own sense of having missed something or being uncertain and the paranoia that your own mind can generate just by leaving you these little gaps of not knowing exactly what happened and how these pieces are all going to connect together necessarily. It's really amazingly done.
And
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say, what's really funny too is like this film is very excessive in so many other ways, but it knows when to dial it back and to just kind of give you just what you need. Like you said, it's a really weird balancing act. I don't know a lot of other films that kind of do that.
Yeah. And if you look at the information they actually do give you, like I said, they're down at this research place, but you've got no idea what they're actually doing there. But all of the characters who are there are pretty clearly defined in, if not their job, their kind of state of mind throughout. Like nobody feels, for the most part, nobody feels really expendable. Obviously, they all are, but it doesn't feel like there's anybody there who's just there to be killed, because they all kind of have their unique way of reacting to the situation, which you don't need any more information about what they do or why they're there in order for that to make any sense.
Right.
So they give you just enough with the characters, but on the other hand, when they do give you more information, it actually works. It works to build the suspense by overloading you, because as the thing goes on and stuff gets more heated and more paranoid, they start giving you all of this like really fast exposition about stuff that people, what their responsibilities are and who could go where. And all it does is just confuses you. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because at that point, everybody in the movie is confused about what's going on. Because I was thinking, and I was going to ask you guys if you could answer this, because I don't know if you can. Is it even possible to track who's infected when? And does it really matter? Because the chaos is sewn into the situation. So you've got guys spitting out stuff like, oh, only I have the key to this thing. So I guess that means that if it wasn't me, it had to be this guy the doctor who I gave the key to. But it's like, even if it doesn't matter if either one of those guys did it, just the fact that they're speculating all this stuff, I don't think there's a direct line that you could point like, oh, it went here and then it went here and then it went here and then it went here. I think they're just throwing all of this stuff at you like JFK Oliver Stone style, just to kind of like keep you off balance as to who it could possibly be.
Cut to Joe Pesci orgy with weird Mozart wigs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and I think those the fade to black and fade out moments that on the first or even second viewing can seem kind of out of place, like they serve that purpose to break up any potential constructing of a real timeline that you can prove about like who went where and when and with whom and all this different, like the movie makes it impossible for you to do that, and it makes you feel like you could do it though. Like if you watched close enough, you feel like you could put the pieces together, but because of the way it's constructed, in the end you really can't. And I do think part of that is because in the end it doesn't really matter. When MacReady stabs Clark, like Clark's still just a dude. Like there's no.
Oh, you mean when he shoots him? You mean when he kills him?
Shoots him? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But like when Clark dies, you don't know if he's infected, and when he dies, it doesn't, like, nothing happens. It doesn't seem like he was.
Right.
But it's just kind of glossed over. Like the movie just keeps moving because at that point it doesn't matter. people are just going crazy.
I love that choice of he shoots Clark, and Clark was just a guy. He made a mistake, but and Childs tries to call him on it. But at the same time, it's like, well, of course he did. I mean, he made a move for him. Like they're in a heightened situation.
Right. What is he going to do?
What I like yeah, exactly. And what I like what you're saying, Amanda, to me is that it puts us with these guys. I'm really confused. I'm really scared. I'm paranoid. I don't know what's going on. I feel like I could put this together if I just had enough information, but I don't. And what I think about what Plato's saying too about you have only enough information is it actually parallels the workplace experience in my life where I don't know who these people are. I do a job with them. I'm kind of irritated by them. There's a weird tension in general because like we have to work together and I want to be here. And these actors really sell that. And then as an audience member, I feel like I'm just another person on the crew. Like I think Childs and Palmer smoke weed and maybe they're friendly, but maybe they're just weed guys. I don't know. And I feel like there's like this and Return of the Living Dead both are like my workplace movies. As a kid, I thought this is what jobs would be like, and I was kind of right. Like it basically is. I don't trust anybody. I'm not sure what's going on, and I hate
There's
it.
that old guy who's real serious, but he's got a nose ring, and what's that all about?
And he might be a secret Nazi. Who's to say?
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I did have an old guy who was a weird old punk rocker guy when I was a dishwasher, and I found out I was like, really, you're like in the Marines or something? It's like, no, dude, I was in this band called the Lost Daughters of Elvis, and I thought about like, yeah, old people also used to be cool, and that was these movies helped me figure that out. Thanks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, by the time you really realize that, you yourself are also old and no longer cool. So
true.
Yeah, it's and it's so funny because it's not like this group of guys is the group of guys from Predator who are like they're all buddies and they've worked with each other all the time and they're this tight knit group or what. These are just like coworkers who are just down there to do this job. You don't necessarily, like you're saying, get the sense that they're really friends.
Yeah.
You might not even know. I don't even know if they knew each other at all before they all showed up. It feels like Alien, kind of the movie Alien,
definitely
in that way, where it's like these are just coworkers doing a job, and they ended up in this crazy situation. Like, sorry, one more thing, maybe then I'll let you throw it back. But I was going to say, the thing with Childs getting on MacReady for shooting Clark, the scene before that, or maybe like two scenes before that, is where MacReady gets locked out and left in the cold. And when he busts back in, Childs says to him, "You would have done the same thing if it was you." And then so two scenes later, MacReady does do something drastic like that, and Childs is the one who is like, "I can't believe you just did that." So it's like even these guys are all reacting differently and not necessarily consistently, and it feels really real.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I was going to say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, you should go first because I have a sort of unrelated thing I want to bring up. Go ahead.
Okay, what I was going to say is that the connective tissue between this and Alien is Dan O'Bannon. So Dan O'Bannon wrote Alien, and then of course he directed Return of the Living Dead too. But he also made Dark Star of John Carpenter when they're in college together, and they had a huge falling out. But that was also a bunch of guys stuck doing a job in space. But I think Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter must have had similar ideas about this kind of like the drudgery of regular work. And I think they're counterculture guys. So like it's the end of the 70s and the 60s dream hasn't worked out. And now it's the early 80s and you got to work and you're getting older and you hate everybody and you don't trust anybody. And some of them are becoming really conservative maybe. And that's like I don't know. I feel like there's a real 70s dread, like kind of like crystallizes in this movie in the early 80s.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really interesting you brought that up, Tony, because something I was reading when I was, getting ready to record tonight with you guys was that Tobe Hooper was actually attached to this first. And I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a lot of that sort of like 70s dread kind of sensibility to it. So I think that's interesting that you made that connection.
I feel like there's a couple projects John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper have like switched off and on again because they're kind of in the same circle in a lot of different years.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about like the projects that they must have like kind of passed like ships in the night on. Like,
I was listening to a different podcast about Halloween, and they mentioned that I think it was about Halloween. If I'm remembering correctly, John Carpenter was supposed to do Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
But
Oh.
I think it was this movie, actually, the failing of this movie lost him the job on Poltergeist.
Oh, wow.
I think. I could be making that up. I might be
I
misremembering.
think I've actually heard the same thing, but yeah.
So
Sorry, Amanda. Yeah,
no,
what were you going to say? Yeah.
that's fine. I have just kind of a weird, like, real life experience with people who have done research in Antarctica.
Oh, really?
Cool.
So one of my previous jobs was I worked for a scientist, and I sort of, like, did a bunch of admin stuff for him and his lab groups. And a couple of the guys attached to his lab group, they were all like geologists and like geochemists. And so there was this one guy. He was probably by now he's close to 70, and he like reminded me of he could very easily be a character in this movie. And he would go every other year. He'd fly down to Antarctica and stay there for 6 months, because I guess like
Jeez.
getting down there and getting back is a really big thing. And if you're going down to do research, it's a shit ton of money to bring all your equipment and everything. So he was telling me that there are times where, when the weather's bad or when the season changes and you can't really be going down there to do active field work, they just leave like a skeleton crew at the base, at the camp. Because somebody has to stick around and kind of make sure things keep running and keep things in decent shape. But it's always like, depending on the size of, if you're at like one of the smaller outposts or the major one, it's more or fewer people. But it kind of is interesting. He was describing it and I was like, oh man, that sounds like The Thing. And he started laughing and he was like, yeah, when newbies come for the first time, that's the movie we make them watch the first night they're there.
That's
awesome.
amazing. Well, I would say that's an unspoken thing, though. Is like all these guys, they chose this job. Like, what's wrong with their lives? Why are they willing to do this? Like,
could you imagine though? I guarantee you, any other movie goes into that,
right?
And it doesn't.
Yeah, we start hearing about McCready's divorce.
Right.
Yeah,
she was a chess prodigy, and he hates her, but he's still trying. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like that stuff it's so open for you to kind of wonder that, but I don't think any of that information makes the movie any better.
Yeah.
Right.
What I do like though is the choosing of Antarctica is, I don't know if you could have picked a better place to set this. Because I was trying to think, I was like, you need something that's really desolate and really removed. It needs to be the frontier, essentially. And the only frontier that really exists is Antarctica, or maybe like the desert. And then I started thinking, actually, The Thing in the desert would be kind of cool. But even there, it's like the desert doesn't feel as out there as the tundra,
Yeah. Although if you're going to do a sequel, I guess you would have to do like the Star Wars Tatooine to Hoth flip. So the second one would have to be somewhere really hot, but isolated. Because basically with the way the creature works, if you put it anywhere else, the movie is like 10 minutes long because it spreads so fast.
Right. Yeah.
But
it's funny, as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, The Thing in the Desert would be kind of cool. And then I thought about that as a title, and I was like, The Thing in the Desert is a cool title. And then I was thinking how funny it would be is if you did a movie called The Thing in the Desert, and then halfway through the movie, people realized, oh, this is just quote unquote The Thing in the desert.
Well, I'm from Arizona, and what's funny, there's actually a roadside attraction called The Thing, and there's like all these like billboards for it, and it's I think a mummified dog or something. It's really terrible. But it's when as a kid seeing the billboards, I was like, oh man, it's probably like awesome, like frozen monster. But I was like, it's middle of Arizona. It's probably not that. So you can make your movie about that. Like, kids are going to go see that, but it's actually John Carpenter's monster. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
You got money. Yeah. You're sitting on a pile of gold.
Absolutely. One of the things I always say about this movie is that I think this is the best H.P. Lovecraft movie that's ever been made. And I know, and every time it's like, oh, well, it was based on a story by William Campbell. And it's like, no, I understand. But if you're looking at this specific thing, this has so much Lovecraft baked into it
Oh yeah.
that I don't even want to call it off-brand, because it's only off-brand because his name isn't on it. Everything in it is very much Lovecraft, where you've got the first of all, Antarctica, like in the Mountains of Madness, or at the Mountains of Madness. You've got the alien itself is very reminiscent of Lovecraft monsters, even the way it kind of flares out into these sort of like star-shaped pieces. That's something that's described very often in his books. The sense of paranoia, and even to a certain extent xenophobia, or just fear of the other. And as we were watching this, someone pointed out that the quote unquote Norwegian being spoken at the beginning is actually just gibberish, which is funny until I thought about it, and I was like, that's actually a really interesting choice, because you are then taking this thing. Maybe I'm just like doing stealing the English major thing from Amanda here, but
I was just thinking you've been spending too much time talking to me.
Yeah, no, you take this thing which seems like, oh, they didn't even bother to get actual Norwegian translation, but it is meant to be something unknown and unknown to the characters of the movie, and you are presenting it in a way where it is also unable to be known to the audience, whoever it is, what is actually being said. So it keeps this element of the unknown and reacting to the unknown, and the unknown being thrust upon you completely intact, because there's not really a way for you to relate to anything that's happening or being said up to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I like what you said about it being kind of focused on like the fear of the other, because the Norwegians, the Norwegian kind of like, it escapes from their camp, so it's something that's infected the American camp from an outside source. It's not like, I always kind of wonder, what if this movie had started with them finding it at their camp? Like, how would that have changed things? Like, why does it kind of happen the way that it does? Like, why is it this whole exterior setup of, the dog has to run in, and other than the fact that it looks really cool, like what is the thought process behind that choice? And I wonder if it is kind of going along with that, where it's like this fear of something from the outside infiltrating in secret.
And I think to build on that, I always thought, a lot of times I feel like in infection stories and stuff like that, people are infected for innocuous reasons, or for doing a good deed even. So this actually starts out, they see this dog being hunted, and they're, what's going on? And this guy has a gun, and so they're actually trying to help a random dog and trying to calm some guy with a gun down. And so in the opposite of a Friday the 13th kind of thing, they're not punished. They're punished for a good deed. And I feel like there's a few like infection stories or disease stories where it is like that, where it's like, oh, you're trying to help somebody with their groceries, and of course that's when you get like the terrible super flu or whatever. And I feel like there's a weird element of xenophobia where, at least like in the Lovecraft idea, where it's like, don't help anyone, don't even talk to anyone you don't know, because you think you're doing something good, but guess what? And I also, you mentioned it's like the best Lovecraft adaptation. To me, what's funny is Carpenter obviously had a thing for Lovecraft. Eventually, he did in the Mouth of Madness, which is so. I mean, he's not trying to hide it whatsoever. But again, him and Dan O'Bannon worked together. Dan O'Bannon did his version of Lovecraft, which became Alien, and John Carpenter did The Thing, and they both have very similar setups at the Mountain of Madness, where these scientists come and they find this thing that's stuck in the ice, and of course all hell breaks loose. So to me, it's almost like they both had like one source material, and they went off in different directions. And I think it's really fascinating what they both came up with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that I find so interesting about this movie and the way that they set the story up, you were saying, what would it be like if it was them who found the creature? And that's what they do in the remake / prequel.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because monsters, a lot of times, like you were saying, Tony, these things are the catalyst for these things is an action taken by your group of protagonists, right? So it's usually some sort of punishment for either doing something right or doing something wrong. And in this, the monster is explicitly amoral.
Right.
Like you can read into Friday the 13th about or any of the slashers if you want to, about how they're actually fairly conservative morality tales about why you shouldn't have sex and do drugs and stuff. Because those are always viewed as the catalyst for the monster.
Right.
But in this one, the thing has no politics. There's no politics in the thing other than when I say the thing, I mean the monster itself. It's just trying to survive.
Well, it is a little known fact that John Carpenter hates dogs, and that he was trying to work into a lot of his films that if you ate a dog, you will suffer the consequences.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Did he kill a dog in Halloween? Actually, maybe there's something to that shit.
Michael Myers, I believe, eats a dog in Halloween.
Oh my god!
Well, you know what? I guess I think I cracked the comic code.
You might be right.
Thing.
You might be onto something. Yeah, but you know what I mean though, because it's like everything is stark in this movie. Even it's almost. I know John Carpenter is a big fan of John Ford, and it almost feels like a Western in its sensibilities, in that it is very stark, and there's Westerns very often are morality tales, but this has a very bleak wasteland type feel to it that wouldn't feel out of place in a Western.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of like an interesting lens to like look at this movie, especially like jumping kind of to the end where you're left with just MacReady and Childs, and like there's this ambiguous ending where you don't know if either of them is infected. You could read it as Childs is infected, and this is some sort of like showdown, like at the very end between the two of them that we don't get to see in a way. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I think the ending follows right in line with that element of you're only getting the detail that you need, and the missing time or the missing pieces aren't ultimately important to the story that they're telling.
Right.
Because much like the way that you don't really know what they're researching, and you don't even really know who infected when and whatnot, that stuff doesn't matter, because it is left up to you to kind of make the decision for yourself and put the pieces together for yourself. I don't think there's any possible way you could end this other than the way that they do that would be satisfying.
Yeah.
The ending is the punchline. It's really a perfect bow to put on this fucked up package, and it feels really earned. Like The Mist, which came out, that ending is really brutal, and it's different from the book, and I get why they did the ending, but it feels compared to this, it feels a little pushed on the audience. Right. It feels a little like they're really trying to kind of like go, gotcha, see that, and this is more like inevitable, and that's why it feels perfect.
Well, that's kind of what I mean as far as like how desolate the entire thing is, because the ending of this is no less of a downer than The Mist. But The Mist is so overwrought in its like you're saying, it's really pushing on you that isn't this horrible, isn't this awful, and the thing just like does what it does. It just lets it lay there, and it's just sort of like, this is how it is.
Yeah, and I also like real quick to go back to the fact that they this happened to the Norwegian camp first. I love in any film when a horror film, when you see what the curse or what the bad thing does to somebody else first. It's like a warning sign. They go to that camp, they see these mangled bodies and burned, and they're like, what happened here? And you're like, obviously this is going to be you like within an hour. Like, and of course people can't heed the warnings, and at the end of the film, there's fire. The camp is burning down, and it's like, yep, this must have been like for the Norwegian guys, except for one guy who went out in a helicopter.
Well, what's interesting is, would you say that having the monster happen to them instead of them being the ones that make the monster happen, for argument's sake, would you guys say that ultimately makes the characters, makes you sympathize with them more than you would in, say, a slasher movie? Because slasher movies, they eventually, what happens is they inevitably turn into these things where you're essentially rooting for the killer for the most part. There's always the one character who's like, oh man, that's awesome that she got this guy, but you're not going to these movies to see how the girl kills the bad guy.
Right.
You know, the draw to
You're
these
not.
movies is
I'm there for
just general,
Kristen
like-
Glover's dancing.
yeah.
And Casey
Everybody
Cornfeld
loves
haircuts.
Jason. Everybody loves Jason, wants to see how he's going to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And so you're not exactly empathizing and feeling scared or worried so much for your characters, because they kind of antagonize or not antagonize, but they open the seal, so to speak,
Yeah.
in some sense.
Yeah.
Whereas
goes...
this one,
Oh,
I was
sorry.
just going to say, whereas in this one, since it happens to them and they are completely devoid of any blame or they have no hand in this actually happening, it feels that much more stressful because you're not waiting for anybody to get a comeuppance or anything.
Right. Yeah. It goes back to what you were saying about how a lot of like slashers tend to be morality tales, where there's something that the characters or some of the characters have done to kind of bring this fate upon themselves, whether it's drugs or sex or whatever. Whereas in The Thing, they didn't really do anything to deserve this. Like, yeah, they helped the dog, but they didn't like. They were just sort of going about the course of their jobs and their lives, and then this all kind of happened to them, which I think is an interesting, like, because, you know, Tony, I think you brought up Alien earlier, and it kind of got me thinking a lot about the ways in which this movie and Alien are two sides of the same coin, and the things that they do similarly that mirror one another, and then the choices that they make that are different. Like I think one of the clearest ways they mirror, or two of them, is the desolate location, the isolation, and then that sort of gradual emergence of the like central hero or protagonist.
Right.
But the things that they do differently are, you know, the crew of the Nostromo makes some choices. Like, whether or not those are well-informed choices, they make certain choices. They actively do certain things. Different people make decisions and take actions that leads to their ultimate fate. Whereas in this, everybody's just kind of doing their normal job, sort of just existing, and then this all just starts happening around them and to them.
And
there's also, I was just gonna say, and there's also politics baked into Alien as well. Not like real world politics, but the idea that this company wants them to bring back this sample, and that there's some question about whether or not them going there in the first place was due to the company they work for sending them that way. So there's that stuff built into it, which
bonus
the Thing
situation.
doesn't have.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Survival.
Let's talk about the bonus situation,
Yes,
man.
yes.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny. Like, that's why I think The Thing's a little more Lovecraft, where it's like the universe is indifferent. This force, it's not evil. It just doesn't give a shit about you. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad or whatever. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's there's no Ash who's behind the scenes pulling the strings for the company. It's you know, you guys got really unlucky.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of
really
Lovecraft
unlucky?
again.
I was gonna say,
yeah. Well, how do you guys feel about the alien stuff? Like, because honestly, my experience with Lovecraft, I love his stuff until he gets specific about where everything comes from. So I've actually never even made it through At the Mountains of Madness, because he goes so in depth about like alien civilizations and day-to-day life, and I do not
there's
care.
like caste systems and shit.
Yeah,
right?
I do not care.
That's like when like the Catholics will go like, these are the angels in this section of heaven. I'm like, what? There's like a street name
Right,
and shit.
yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, the hierarchy of angels and shit.
Right.
Like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't think it's really
Wait,
interesting.
you don't want to
Some
know
people
who's
do.
a seraphim and who's not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you're like, well, Peter Parker's mailman was in the first three. I'm like, I don't care. It doesn't matter at all. Like,
Yeah.
So So is your question with this movie? I like the vagueness. In fact, I almost wish they didn't show the spaceship at the beginning.
That's what I was going to say.
Definitely wish they didn't show the spaceship.
I think the weakest part of this movie is the spaceship stuff.
No.
I actually like the scene where they're watching the video of the Norwegians finding it, and I like the scene where they go to find the ship. But I hate the shot at the beginning where you see the thing the ship crashing on Earth.
Yeah.
And I hate the friggin' boxcar racer that Blair is building. It's just so silly.
I don't
Wilford
really
Brimley's
mind.
ship is.
I
love it.
Let Wilford Brimley have his ship. I'm
Even
fine with that.
His Rosebud for outer space. I mean, that thing rocks.
Yeah, I guess they don't.
I know.
I guess they don't spend too much put too much focus on it or whatnot. But I love the unknown element of like they found something in the ice. It's been there for 100,000 years and now it's loose. I'm so much more interested in that than I am about, oh, well, it's an alien and here's its ship. And I don't know. That stuff doesn't work.
I almost felt it was like a note from the studio. Like, hey, we probably should tack this just so people get it. You know, it's put in the spaceship because it feels a little odd.
Let's kick off that silent first 15 minutes with something that's really going to grab their attention.
Although,
I always forget that shot's in there because in my head, the opening scene is just the title, that awesome like burning title thing.
The title is so good.
I always forget that comes after the shot of the spaceship flying to Earth.
I also feel like even to Predator, I think the Predator spaceship at the beginning is also not needed.
Same, I agree, 100%.
Because then Predator becomes like from dusk till dawn situation. You know, it's like
right.
It's a real like it's a little more of a surprise when Van Damme comes out of the woods and kills you.
Right.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I like maybe tolerate the Wilford Brimley's homemade spaceship is because I sort of like the idea that this alien, the thing, it's not like one of the leaders of its society.
Sure.
Like it doesn't seem like it has like it can build a spaceship and it can imitate anybody, but it somehow can't like finish off this handful of random dudes.
Right.
Like
that's kind of cool. So it almost like it's like one of the guys on the station. It's like some worker dude. It's like
right who just got like left behind, like there was an accident and he's
it's
like,
the
oh
McCready
shit,
of the thing world. It's a reluctant like fuck, dude. I just want to get drunk in my cabin, like crash on this planet 10,000 years.
Build my space helicopter and get the fuck out of here.
That's really great. I love it. It's a pilot versus a pilot, and they're both just lazy and they're okay at their jobs, I guess. But
yeah, when push comes to shove, they'll put in effort.
I think the thing that always irked me about the spaceship thing though is like it's such a classic flying saucer,
right?
And when you compare it to the monster that you're dealing with, it's like this amorphous like blob tentacle thing who's just built this classic 1950s flying saucer that it's just going to climb in and fly away. You know, it just stylistically, it doesn't really match.
I definitely get that. Like design wise, it's funny. This thing is, in a lot of ways, it's the anti-Giger. It's not sleek or elegant looking the creature, but the ship, I would dig something looking like organic, biomechanically like Giger kind of, or something that would fit this thing better.
Yeah.
I just even like the alien from Alien. Imagine if the alien from Alien was trying to build a spaceship, and so that means in your head there's a scene where the alien from Alien climbs into the cockpit of a spaceship, turns the spaceship on, and then just like jets away in a spaceship. It feels weird. It doesn't really fit.
Yeah, very much agreed. And also, this is a thought I only had. I'm 38. Only had this like this year where I was like, if it could turn into anything from Countless Worlds, why doesn't this grow wings and fly away? And I was like, fuck, the whole movie is just ruined. I'm like, no, just don't. There's a reason. There's a reason not.
It's too cold, man. His wings will ice up.
Totally, right.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's part of the beauty of this movie is like, it doesn't really open up the possibilities for those sorts of questions. Like, the thing transforms into whatever it has most recently touched.
Right.
Like whatever organic thing it has most recently absorbed is the shape that it then takes. And it doesn't really like, I like that you don't see it like when you see it get hurt and kind of go into a defensive mode and it just turns into whatever sort of monster it can, I feel like that's different than if we saw like one of the dogs transform himself into like Norris or something. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. It's shocked, it's hurt, it's exactly, it's in flight or fight mode or whatever.
Right. There's not like a moment where you see somebody transmutate from like, you know, Childs into Palmer or whatever. Like it doesn't, if it had done that, it would open up those questions about like, well, wait a minute, if it can just like at will turn into something else, why doesn't it just do, you know, hey, I'm also McCready, like which one of us is real?
Yeah.
Right.
It makes one of the things that makes it, I think, work so well is that its transformations are not easy. They are a very physical process that this creature has to go to. It's not like Mystique from the X-Men where I can just like blink and turn into Hugh Jackman.
No, it's very true because like basically, you know, they didn't do it with the prequel, but if they would have made the first John Carpenter's The Thing after T2 happened and the CGI was, you would have lost so much of the monstrousness and kind of the weird agonized beauty of all these crazy transformations, and it would have been this smooth. It'd be kind of lifeless.
And that's probably a good point to talk about some of the special effects in this, which I think. I mean, do you think I'm out of line saying that this movie has arguably the best practical effects of any horror movie?
What do you think, Amanda? I'll let you answer first.
Oh God. I mean, I certainly can't, off the top of my head, think of one, especially one that's contemporary to The Thing. Like, I can't think of one that does it better. So I'd have to say, yeah.
I think for me, it's just the scope of the stuff that they do is so impressive, and it's photographed so well that I think this stuff. I don't want to say it's timeless because there are a little parts that look squishy. Rob Bottin's heads always look a little bit rubbery for me, but they actually look pretty good in this movie. But
yeah, rubbery works in this movie.
Yeah, I think overall, the effects in this movie stand up really well for over time, and that the fact that they all stand up so well, and they had to do so much crazy shit, and it's not just a matter of like one sequence where they do something cool or one creature that it's like, oh, the pumpkinhead monster, he's cool, but that's like the only thing in that movie. Or the alien, oh, the alien's cool, but that's like the only thing in that movie. This is multiple different creatures, all sorts of crazy shit in all different situations, transmuting into different things and heads turning into spiders and shit. And it's so inventive. And I know, Tony, you were saying the other night that Rob Bottin was in a little bit over his head and was having a bit of a breakdown. And I don't blame him because this is an incredible task that he pulled off.
Yeah. So I basically, I totally agree. I think this is probably the best example of practical effects. And the reason why I think it gets kind of, its cake and it gets to eat it too, is Rob Bottin, what he envisioned with this creature, it's allowed to not look real, and that's okay because it's something you've never seen before. And like you said, it's in a lot of ways, this film only happens in this form because of Alien. Because basically, after seeing John Carpenter watch his old friends, they became kind of enemies. Dan O'Bannon's script turned into Alien. He said Alien is amazing. He's like, there's no guy in a rubber suit that's going to beat that creature. That thing looks great.
Right.
He said, I don't want to do a guy in a rubber suit. And he said, Rob Bottin, what do you got for me? And Rob's like, you know, what if this thing could be any monster, like any monster? And then eventually they start talking about, oh yeah, you chop its head off, then the head's alive, and then this, and in basically, not only did Rob Bottin and Carpenter have the imagination to think of that, Rob Bottin figured out how to do that. And you mentioned how well the things are lit, and that's mostly Bottin. Rob Bottin was notoriously really sensitive about how his creations were lit, and the joke was on the set of The Howling and on The Thing was that he'd spend 8 hours setting up a shot so you could see nothing he had built, and it took weeks to build because he just wants like a bare. You just want to see like a little bit of an eyebrow or a gleam of an eye and some fangs, and it's like, well, let's show this thing. But I think the film has basically. It has this really nice advantage of it's a million gags all in one, and like when Norris's head flies off his body and like the neck is bursting and it looks like taffy. That looks great because it's not supposed to be a normal human man's head somehow
Right.
being it's supposed to be an
Right.
alien kind of transmogrifying. So it gets to be weird and dreamlike, and it's all the better for it. And what's crazy too is Rob Bottin did this film when he was 21. He finished when he was 22.
That's
Holy
insane.
shit.
Yeah, he started working
Oh my
at
God.
age 14.
I've done
as
nothing with my life.
Yeah, I know, right? So not to divert, but
Sure.
Amanda, the thing every time I think about this, it makes me feel like I've wasted my life. Did you know that the Beatles broke up when George Harrison was 26?
Like most rock stars hadn't
Oh my
died
God.
yet. Like
Yeah, the Beatles broke up when George Harrison was 26.
Holy shit.
Anyway, now
Well-
that you're all feeling terrible about yourselves, let's
Yeah.
talk about Rob Bottin.
Yeah, well, so the story goes. Rob Bottin, he was age 14. He became an apprentice for Rick Baker, who, of course, did the effects for American Werewolf in London. And he's won more Oscars than anybody for special effects. And so at 14, Rob Bottin was his like protege. And so by age 20, he did the Howling, and then John Carpenter tapped him for The Thing. So it was a year of production for Rob Bottin, and Bottin actually he gave up his apartment and lived at Universal Studios. He just thought it'd be easier. And after a year, after they're finished, he went into a hospital for exhaustion, and it's not confirmed, but there have been multiple people said he actually had a couple ulcers.
Oh, jeez.
Oh God.
And so the show was all his except for he was they were behind, they had over budget, behind schedule, and so they had to do one more effect, which was going to be the when the dog monster kind of when all the dogs in the kennel are destroyed. And
Oh
it has
yeah.
and it's really great. So Rob Bottin basically he singled that effect out. He's like, I just did a bunch of dog things for the Howling. I don't want to do another dog thing. And so he asked Stan Winston, who Stan Winston at the time had done a lot of TV work, and he actually was nominated for the first special effects Oscar. It was just him and Rick Baker. Rick Baker won for American Werewolf, and he did this terrible. Stan Winston did a really bad Andy Kaufman movie about robots that no one liked.
How did he get nominated, but not Rob Bottin for the friggin' Howling?
That's another really interesting thing. So the thing with the Howling is that was going to be a Rick Baker movie. He was going to do the effects for it, but he had promised John Landis that if John Landis ever got his shit together and got the money to do American Werewolf, because they've been trying to do that for 8 years, he'd do that. Well, John Landis got his shit together. And so Rick Baker didn't want to do it. He's like, I promised I'd do this movie. And so he's like, my protege, Rob Bottin, I think he's ready. He can do this film. And so Rob Bottin did the Howling effects, but him and Rick Baker, and probably more Rick Baker, really thought of how to do the transformation. And so that's why they're so similar in Werewolf and in the Howling. And so I think a lot of the insider talk was that maybe Bottin didn't exactly deserve the full credit for the effects for that movie. And he gets screwed for The Thing, too, for another reason, which I'll go into later. But anyways, real quick. So he asked Stan Winston if he would do the dog thing, which actually was just a hand puppet, but it looks great. But it's just a guy's forearm inside a little glistening hand puppet covered in KY jelly.
That's crazy.
And right. And it's funny is Stan Winston and Rick Baker, who is Rob Bottin's mentor, they kind of had a rivalry. But Rob Bottin, he got Stan Winston to do this for him. That kind of put Stan on the map theatrically, and then James Cameron and Stan Winston, the Terminator, and all of a sudden Stan Winston is like the number 1 or number 2 guy with Rick Baker, and Bottin is sort of like I'm not gonna say indie darling, but this is the one that he's like the special effects guy. This is the one they all really respect and love, and he did it when he was 21, 22 years old, and it's astonishing. Like he's had a crazy career. I again, the George Harrison thing, I cannot imagine being that young and doing probably the best work of my life.
Right.
Yeah. On the one
and
hand,
it being a failure.
Right.
Yeah. On the one hand, it makes me like, I feel like I haven't done anything. But on the other hand, it must be so hard when you're that young and you've already hit what artistically for you probably feels like such a pinnacle. And then you're not getting the recognition for it.
Orson Welles disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. And like, there's I don't want to go on super huge tangent, but there's tons of Rob Bottin stories. He was on the Star Wars set as a 16-year-old kid. He's in the Mos Eisley scene. He's one of
Oh,
the
that's right. I've heard that.
he's
Yes.
one of the
yeah.
cantina players, like one of the because he's a really tall kid.
Oh my
And
god.
well, I'll say real quick, this is a great story. He was on set, and him and Rick Baker made a bunch of special effects for the Space Cantina scene that they did a reshoot, and they did that. And so on set, some guy asked him, like, "What do you think of the scene?" And Rob Bottin, 16 years old, was like, "It's kind of silly, all these monsters all together at once. It's just kind of dumb. I think people are gonna laugh." And the guy was like, "Yeah, I guess you're probably right." And he walked away. And then Rick Baker's like, "Hey, what did George want?" He's like, "Who's George?" He's like, "The director." He's like, "That guy's the director?"
Oh my god.
And that was it was Bottin's like first day on set of any set.
Oh
That's
my
crazy.
god.
How did he get screwed over on the thing?
Okay, so this is really weird. I follow one of the producers of the thing, Stuart Cohen. He has his own blog all about the making of the thing. And so the thing, Rob Bottin is credited as special makeup effects by Rob Bottin.
Mhm.
Well, at the time in '82, there was this big hubbub about most of, or if not all of Rob Bottin's actual makeup effects are not applied to human beings. Almost all of them are animatronics or puppets.
Oh,
And
interesting.
back then, they were like, special makeup effects, even if they're special makeup effects, there are makeup applied to people. So we can't give him this credit. And if you do give him this credit, we're going to fine you because it's anti-union. So,
wow.
so I think Rob was like, I think I should get this credit. I don't want to fight too much. And John Carpenter and the producers like, screw it, whatever the fine is, I forget how much it was, but we'll take the fine. So they took the fine, they gave him the credit anyways. And there's a rumor that, yes, the film didn't do great box office wise, but the real reason why Rob wasn't, I think, even nominated was that they are still pissed about him just saying, screw it, I'll pay the fine, give me the credit I want. And of course,
Really?
the next year or two, that was fine. They just changed the rules because like so many special effects have become just like weird animatronics and not applied to people.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
Pretty weird, right? Like,
yeah.
It just seems like
Now,
in so many ways this like movie was very much ahead of its time, and that
Mhm.
it took the rest of like Hollywood and then the audience like extra time to kind of catch up to like get to the level that they were all already at.
and I don't know about you, Amanda or Clay. Like, I love that romantic, tortured artist story. I love reading that and hearing about that. But I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for the guys.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, like
No.
Carpenter and Bottin and everybody else. I just can't imagine how like it's just gotta really hurt deep down. And you're like, I really did my best. Like this is the best I can do. And you guys, and especially it's gotta be so bitter in like 10, 15 years, and everyone's like, oh man, that was brilliant. And you're like, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
Like, where were you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What happened to Rob Bottin? Because the last, I feel like he kind of stopped doing stuff after, or at least as super prominently after Total Recall. The last thing that I remember seeing him do, and I only know it's him because his stuff has a very specific look to it, is Starship Troopers, right?
I'm not positive.
Did he not do Starship Troopers?
He might have, because he definitely worked with Paul Verhoeven on RoboCop and Total Recall, so it makes sense. But I know the last thing big one that I remember is Fight Club. And
Right.
Oh, really?
So yeah, and it's funny. He's what's really cool about his style is that it is very stylized. So you can tell his monsters, and they don't really like Rick Baker. His mentor is more realistic. Even though we're talking about werewolves and ghouls and aliens, it looks closer to like what you would imagine the real anatomy or whatever it would be. And Rob Bottin's more fantastical. But as he evolved with Fight Club, he did 7 and he did Fight Club. When he does like who's 30 Seconds from Mars guy?
Jared Leto.
Yeah, when Jared Leto's face gets demolished in Fight Club, that looks very real. It looks rough.
It does, yeah.
And like in 7, he did that. There's a bunch of Polaroids of the guy who I think he dies of the sin of famine, or not famine, the sin of.
Oh yes, yeah.
He wastes away, and Rob Bottin like studied a bunch of like real like people who died of starvation and corpse photos, and he took the Polaroids himself, and it's really disturbing stuff. It's funny. It's only shown on Polaroid on a film, but anyways, Rob Bottin. One of the reasons why I wrote my book, which is heavily inspired by his career, is that no one knows where he is, and it's really weird. Like, so basically, when CGI kind of takes over, and then like the early 2000s, these practical effects guys are getting less and less jobs, and a lot of times they'll pitch for a movie, and then last minute they go, we're just gonna go CGI, it's cheaper, and sorry, and they're out money they put in for their test effects and whatnot. So Rob Bottin, I think, basically said, I can see where this is going. I'm going to be out. And there are rumors that one rumor is that he sells real estate in the Midwest. And he's very happy. And he's fine. He doesn't really want the spotlight. There's another rumor that he actually did the effects for the Joffrey death in Game of Thrones for free. He came on set and did that.
Really?
Yeah, it's a rumor from a couple of different places. Can't confirm it. And there's some other rumors that, he's happy and content, but he doesn't want to work anymore. And of course, his mentor Rick Baker just retired a couple of years ago, and Rick Baker said the same thing. I was tired of not getting jobs I wanted, and also just like people, like the Thing prequel, they CGI effect on top of the practical effects after the fact.
Yeah.
And so I think Rob Bottin just didn't want any part of that. And real quick, there's a really funny story. I think his name's Steve Johnson. He's the guy who did the effects on Ghostbusters and Big Trouble in Little China, and he's the guy who worked for Rob Bottin and Rick Baker. He wrote a book called Rubberhead. It's a tell-all book, and he talks about working on The Howling, and this is back in 1980. And Rob Bottin's like his boss then, he's only 20, and then this guy's probably the same age, and they're in the garage, and Rob Bottin's getting him drunk. And Rob Bottin's saying how he just came back from a kind of a show-off seminar where they showed him a bunch of computer-generated images, and they showed him how they can make spaceships with them. And he was telling this guy, Steve Johnson, like, we're going to be out of a job in 10 years. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? He's like, they used to get ice from frozen parts of the mountain and bring it all the way back down to town. And you chip off the ice, and that would be the ice people use in their houses. It's like, then they made freezers. He's like, we're the iceberg. We're the thing you drag back from the mountain. Like, there's no need for us. And so It sounds like Bottin might have seen the wave cresting a little sooner than anyone else.
Interesting, yeah. And I looked it up quickly. Looks like Kevin Yeager actually did the special effects on Starship Troopers, but it looks a lot like Bottin's stuff. But I'm not going to split hairs over that. But yeah, he's a really interesting guy. He seems to be he's this weird phantom of the special effects world, because he was doing amazing stuff for the 10 years and up. Most of his most memorable stuff is in the 80s, and then he did some stuff in the 90s, and then he just sort of disappeared. And I'm always surprised when you don't hear him talked about the way people talk about Stan Winston or Rick Baker.
Yeah, and I've done my research. I've talked to some people who do work still in the industry, and I've read a bunch, and he's definitely kind of held to us. He's the sexy rock star one. He's the one who's
sure.
He's like the Doors. If most people hate the Doors, but they did like 5-6 albums, and they're gone, and that the story is done, and people kind of like that. There's a weird ending to this.
Yeah.
And Stan Winston's sort of like the Stan Lee kind of figure, where people are like, he's a good businessman, but it's more like the guys he had under him doing most of the work, whereas Bottin and Rick Baker are really thought of like they did their best stuff themselves, like they were a real artist. It's interesting.
That's an interesting world to dive into. It's cool that you decided to do a comic about that.
Yeah, it's something I always thought about when I read Fangoria magazine. Like, these guys looked really young, and they all looked like they listened to like Pantera and had really shitty mustaches. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I'm almost there. My mustache is pretty shitty. I think Pantera's a little hard, but I'll try.
I'll get there.
Yeah, and so it seemed attainable. It's like I'm a big comic book guy, so it's like when I saw Extreme Studio stuff of Rob Liefeld's stuff in the 90s, and everyone had like acne and bad mullets. I'm like, dude, in 3 years I can draw like as bad as like Rob Liefeld's Brigade or whatever. Like, I'm there, dude. It's like, wait.
Yeah, that was the stuff that made me go, oh man, I'd love to be a comic book artist. And then the ass fell out of the entire industry. So,
exactly.
I'm not buying Ferraris off of royalties off of Savage Dragon or anytime soon. But
all my things I love to do, the industry falls apart before I.
I know, right?
It's
just to kind of wind it down, I wanted to talk about the music a little bit.
Bum, bum.
Yeah, it's we mentioned it at the start, but it's really interesting that they hired Ennio Morricone, this famous, highly regarded composer, to do the music for this movie. Mm-hmm. And basically just a classy John Carpenter
It
score.
blew my
And-
mind to discover that.
Yeah.
I did not realize that until we were going into it this time, and I was just like,
And what makes it even harder to wrap your mind around is John Carpenter actually did music for it as well. There are certain places where they needed like just a couple basically filler music. And so John Carpenter comes in and does his John Carpenter thing in a few places. So you end up with this mix of high class John Carpenter via Ennio Morricone and the straight stuff, No Chaser from John Carpenter and his synthesizer. So I think the score to The Thing is one of the best horror scores that has been written.
Yeah, it definitely
agree.
it works. Yeah, it just like it just purely works for like what is going on visually in that movie. It's like I can't really imagine any of that film happening with a more like traditional horror movie score. You know what I mean?
Did you guys see Hateful Eight?
Yes.
Because they used some of the Thing music in it and some of the unused Thing music that Morricone had written.
Oh, do they really? I guess I
that's
didn't pick
cool.
that out specifically.
Yeah,
but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
There's I know the musical cue when in The Thing when they discover the Norwegian camp, the frozen cutout where the body of the monster must have been like thawed out or whatever. There's a weird. It sounds like the closest to real Morricone stuff where you sort of hear like some strings going. I can't do it, but they sound kind of. They sound just like that. But anyways, that's directly in Hateful Eight. The woo woo woo, and I think that it's funny. I think the music's great, but in the realm of John Carpenter's scores, it's like mid-level for me.
Sure. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
He has so many like super iconic, like I could listen to Assault on Precinct 13's main theme like on a loop for 3 days and be fine.
Yeah.
Be fine? Are you sure?
Well, you got me there on that one.
I always wonder what the process must have been like for Carpenter working with Morricone, because if it were me, based on what they ended up with, and if it were me, I feel like the whole time I'd be thinking, why didn't I just do this myself?
Right.
Like, because you're hiring someone who's like just this amazing composer, and what you end up getting him to do is sort of like I said, a classy version of what you do, and trying to direct Ennio Morricone into the John Carpenter universe seems like more effort than it might have been worth when you could have just done the whole thing yourself.
Potentially more budget too.
Right. I imagine him walking to like his studio, and Morricone's got a bunch of orchestra people. He's like, "No, come here. This is a chord. Come here. This is a synthesizer. Just hit these 3 notes. That's great. That's great. You're doing.
We can't pay for an orchestra, but you don't need one because I've got this keyboard and it makes a lot of weird noises. So just play with this for a while."
But it is interesting, like talking about Morricone and like how I think Clay, you had brought up how there are like shades of a Western over this, and I wonder if there's something like because he did the scores for so many of like the big like Westerns. I wonder if if you listen, like if there are kind of undertones to that.
Well, it's funny you should say that because Tony, you brought up Hateful Eight, and I've always thought that the soundtrack to Hateful Eight sounds like what Ennio Morricone's soundtrack to The Thing would have been if they just said, "Go do your thing."
Well, it kind of is, I guess.
Yeah, it's got the same kind of, because they're similar movies to a certain extent.
Yeah,
and it's got the same kind. They both have very much the same kind of vibe, especially the openings and stuff. Yeah. But the Hateful Eight soundtrack is much more classic Morricone than The Thing is.
And they're both basically what unites those films just thematically is they're Agatha Christie. They're they're and that's such
and then there were none.
Exactly. Right. That story almost can't fail. It's always a little interesting, and I think that Tarantino did that on purpose. And of course, Kurt Russell being in both, I think wasn't a mistake. Of
course. Yeah.
And he plays a very different role in it, but I was going to say real quick, Amanda, you touched on this. And I thought this a lot. What I love about for me, the Alien and The Thing are very much sister films, and of course the monsters are very different, and then the main protagonists
Oh,
are.
I'm sorry.
What?
I thought you said the Munsters. I thought you were going to make like this Monsters and Addams Family comparison. I was like, no, the Munsters are very different than the Addams Family. I'm interested to see where this goes, but they're also very similar.
When I moved to New England, everyone called me out in the way I said monsters. I should say monsters, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, you guys are wrong. You guys say things all fucked up. I don't know.
That's
But anyways, the monster. No, so the main characters. What's funny to me is like, so of course you have one main character kind of rises up and it starts trying to get things together, but like McCready is super reluctant, and Ripley she's all for it, but everyone's sexist and won't listen to her basically.
Yeah,
right.
And it's such a funny difference because like McCready, it's like, I think he could have taken charge a little earlier because the guys kind of respect them in a way, it seems like. But
oh yeah,
he just doesn't want to do it. He's so like, and as a kid, I was like, that's right, dude. I could do anything, but I'm not gonna.
Right.
Yeah.
and it's like it's so not how life works usually.
The mark of a truly cool guy is that he can do it, but he doesn't want to.
I think I love like Pearl Jam. I was like, yeah, reluctance is a virtue. And now as I'm older, I'm like, what? Like what? No, I mean having cool hair rules, but that's unabashedly that's true. But like,
it's interesting you bring that up because I don't know if we want to open this can of worms an hour and 18 minutes into our show, but this movie, as we mentioned at the top, has no women in it, and I think I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't see that as a failing because I think the story they're telling is so heavily dependent on masculinity butting heads that it makes sense that you have all of these different male characters who are in the situation, just all of their toxic masculinity going back and forth kind of is part of what the story is built on.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and I think there's probably like period accuracy over the fact that there aren't a lot of women kind of taking these jobs, and like it doesn't seem like the sort of environment where they were like very progressive and all about like, yeah, we're going to have gender equality in this workplace in 1982 in Antarctica. Like,
yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If they put a woman in it, it was probably going to be like Vasquez from Aliens or something,
Right. She's going to be extremely masculine, and yeah.
I kind of think two things. First thing is like Kurt Russell in 1982 doesn't need a woman in his film. He is breathtakingly beautiful.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
Anyone else, this would be a distraction. What else do you need? But the second thing actually is, you guys ever see the Descent from like 2003 or so? It's a bunch of women who go inside a cave.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. And to me, my first thought when I saw that, because it's an all-woman cast, I was like, oh, cool, this is like a nice counter to The Thing. And
right, yeah.
I think The Descent was probably more intentional. I think The Thing was intentional too, but I can't be certain. But intentionally, like when you only have one gender represented, you think there's a reason for it, so you start thinking, what are the dynamics here? So I think The Thing was intentional, but even if it isn't, it becomes text. So I am thinking about like, these guys being toxic, and of course, the very end, it feels like two men who, if they could just communicate, none of this might not happen, or there's a little bit of that in there, and I think that if you had a woman in there, it could work, but it would be different. Yeah,
it's interesting because I think no matter which way you look at it, you kind of run up against this interesting like stereotyping of, well, if there was a woman there, like or women there, they would get everybody to work together and there would be communication. And it's like maybe not, but that is sort of the role that women typically play in these kind of movies, especially back in like the 70s and the 80s. That is what you would expect of like female characters, which is, I think, not to go too far into Alien, part of what's so interesting about Alien, where like Ripley sort of wants people to work together, and she kind of wants to take charge, but then I'm blanking on the other woman on the crew's name.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But she has none of that. She's not like
right.
Yeah, it's like one of the most equitable portrayals.
And even the descent, it's like it's not like everything worked out great for them. No, of course there was no communication. Yeah, very good point.
And it's also when they did the remake / prequel, they did add at least one woman. I don't remember if there's more than one.
Yeah, the main character is a woman, right?
Yeah, but from what I remember, they ended up doing it in like the worst possible way, where it then turned into like it's the girl and the guy she kind of likes or something, or are two of the last ones, and it just has that whole dynamic to it that's like, this is not what we meant when we said there should be a woman in the story.
Exactly. Yeah, and like what I was kind of getting at a little bit earlier, probably poorly, is that like, yeah, it does feel intentional that this is all men, but it doesn't feel like it's intentionally excluding women. It feels more like it's intentionally focusing on the men. Like,
sure.
And that sort of attitude, and that like, yeah, we're like out in this wilderness and we're like rough and tumble guys who don't need luxuries and nice things. And it's not like actively working to say like women are dumb and we don't need them. It's more just like, but what happens when you put all of these guys in this place alone together and have this happen?
Dogs die.
And it's not dog more dog a lot of probably more dog deaths in a movie I've seen in a while, but yes. And the portrayal of the men in this movie, it's not a bunch of it's not like a Western in that way, where it's not a bunch of John Waynes together.
Right.
They are all, none of them are really heroic or in the traditional sense of being that way. It's like, even I would say the person with the most machismo in the movie is probably Childs, and even he is not exactly chomping at the bit to go after this thing. You know, nobody in the movie is really portrayed as someone who has it together, or someone who is like, they're not Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. It is a very interesting and multifaceted portrayal of a bunch of men in this situation, all reacting negatively.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to wrap it up, we mentioned this at the beginning. I wanted to look at this from a couple angles. One, I guess both speculative. Placement on the list. I think we all agree this should be a lot higher than 138.
Yeah, a little bit.
So we could probably skate past that. So the last thing I was thinking, why do you think this movie didn't land when it came out? Like, what is it? Is it this hangover of 70s dread when we're 2 years into the 80s and E.T. is coming out, so things are starting to, people want a little bit more positivity in their movies or whatnot? Like, was it just a perfect storm of climate, world climate versus plus the kind of movies that people were into at the time? Like, why didn't this land the way that Alien did 2 years before?
What do you got, Amanda?
I think there are probably quite a few reasons. Partially, I'm sure what Clay was bringing up earlier, where there were just so many movies that were like heavy hitters that came out around this time.
But also, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
A lot of heavy hitters that didn't do well. Like, there's a lot of cult classics came out in this area, which is also really interesting. But continue. Sorry.
That is interesting. I think one thing out of several that I am kind of focused on, because it's something I've been talking about it a lot in school lately. About how American,
Is the Babadook directly responsible for this?
the Babadook. All right, Tony. The background of that is I just finished class this summer, and I wrote my final paper on the Babadook.
Great film. I loved it.
It was wonderful. Clay, I got an A. So there.
Yes.
The Babadook is great. He's a gay icon now. I'm a new parent. He means a lot to me. Yeah.
Well, actually, in a way, the Babadook does kind of fall into this pattern, especially since the Babadook's an Australian film. But I've been thinking a lot about how like American audiences don't love endings that are not happy, and they really don't love endings that are ambiguous. People love like a strong ending or closure or something definite that tells them this is what happened, this is what you watched, and this is why, and this is where it ends, and now it is finished. Like, that's a very American, like, that need to have a specific ending and to have a really, really clearly delineated stopping point, especially one that gives you some sort of like positive feeling or you know, a little bit of glimmer of hope or like something to kind of uplift you at the end. And this movie really refuses to do that. Like it refuses to make that decision for you. It refuses to sort of pigeonhole the storyline into this like, oh yeah, McCready and Childs ended up both being fine, and oh look, a rescue helicopter is coming to get them, and everybody's gonna be saved, and it's great. Like, it makes you sit with that feeling of, you know, something awful just happened, and then these guys are gonna die here, and nobody's really gonna know what they went through. And that's like a big downer when you think about it. And I think audiences just don't really, they don't gravitate towards that a lot.
I think you said everything I was thinking. I feel that ending, which is basically the heart of the movie, is exactly why it didn't connect initially. And maybe it's a difference between it and Alien in a lot of ways. Alien is very nihilistic and dark, but at the very end, you know, Ripley gets out of there and she's okay, and she'll probably be picked up, and you know, and there's that little glimmer of hope, like you said, and
even the cat makes it out.
Right. The cat lives, and the dog dies over and over again. But also,
maybe that's it. Maybe it's just because they kill so many dogs.
They kill so many dogs.
like, imagine if an alien, before anybody on the ship died, they just threw like 14 cats into space.
It's like, turns out in space you just eat cats. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, here's another thing too. I think this is exaggerated. In my mind, I do wonder if is part of the reason why America doesn't like ambiguity and not winning Vietnam. I mean, it could just be common sense. It could just be like, hey, people in general like when things have a good ending. It just seems like a positive, normal thing. But I kind of wonder, this happened in '82, you know, like obviously John Carpenter, I think, his generation, he was still reeling from the malaise of this unending, needless war kind of thing. And I just wonder if, like, you go to the movies for escapism. That's if America. That's what that. Like my sister, for instance, any film that has a downer ending or ambiguity, she's like, "Why did I pay for that? I had that in real life." And to me, I'm like, "Well, I don't go to a film just for escapism. I enjoy escapism, but there's other." And to her, I can't really argue because, like, for her, no, I want to see the good guy win, and I just wonder if that's what it was. And of course, you know, there is the storm of E.T., and so E.T. is quite the opposite. E.T. is space Jesus, and he's gonna do everything right.
It.
Right, and so I mean, I think I think the ending being a downer in E.T. I think you're right, but it's funny. A lot of these films, like Bladerunner, is another kind of downer ending. And after these films, you know, like Fight Club is another film where like it was a bomb, but now, you know, on DVD people love it. A lot of people for wrong reasons, but they love it, and it had a downer ending.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. You said that The Thing is very ahead of its time. I feel like E.T. was what people in 1982 thought the world was like, and we have now learned from the time in which we are currently living that The Thing is actually what the world is like.
Yeah,
nobody trusts anybody anymore. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen when this is all over. I'm going to hide this when I'm done saying it.
What you gotta do is the sequel where it's ETT, the extra thing or whatever, and so it's basically you find that ET left a disease. He left a terrible virus, and it's the pandemic. And now Elliot's all messed up, and it's that.
Well, what would be great? I don't know if you guys have seen on Shudder. There's this amazing new. I guess technically you'd call it a short film. It's about an hour long. It's called Host, and it's a. They shot it in 12 weeks during the pandemic in quarantine. And it is a ghost story presented as a Zoom meeting. So there's six girls who all get together and do this seance, and the seance goes wrong, and the ghost comes out and stuff. It's really awesome. I highly recommend it. It's like it's the next piece, I think, in the Blair Witch to Paranormal Activity kind of like
found
step.
Footage kind of.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's got a great gimmick. It's very timely. But I was thinking they should just do a remake of The Thing, but they should do it entirely through Facebook memes. So like as there's this someone starts talking about this alien that's come to Earth, and then people stop trusting each other depending on what they're putting on Facebook and how their memes are being received, and then everybody
kind of like a hybrid of Invasion of the Body Snatchers too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically, yeah, all of these downer ending sci-fi movies are just like, that's the thing, is I think people are kind of turning off to dystopian sci-fi stuff because they're like, wow, yeah, everybody was just right.
yeah. Remember like 6 or 7 years ago when post-apocalyptic like fiction and movies had a huge moment?
Yeah.
Right. Now it's not fun anymore. Yeah.
Right. It's not escapism. It's not fun. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah. Well, anyway, do you guys have anything else you'd like to say before we?
I think we're going to end it on a
that
downer,
high note.
So
yeah, just like the movie itself, we're going to go out on a downer.
How will we go on? Maybe we shouldn't.
We got some bourbon. Just hide behind this snowdrift. We'll be fine.
Yeah, until we both die. Anyway,
bye, everybody.
That's gonna do it for The Thing. We've reached it. We've reached our milestone. I believe 20th episode will be our next episode, which means we are doing a wild card. And Amanda, it is your pick. Have you decided what you'd like to do?
I have decided. I'm pretty sure I know that you like this one. I think you're going to be happy with this choice.
I don't. Just again. You don't have to pick movies you think I'm going to like.
No. I am not, but I am.
Though I do control the edit.
Well, no, I like keeping you in suspense of what time I'm going to pick. I am the pretty thing that lives in the house.
Yes.
Because I am going to make you rewatch that, and I know you.
Yeah, I mean, unless the show just happens to end before we get to that one.
That's when I pick it, and you're like, "Well, this was our last episode, everyone."
Yeah. Anyway, what do you got for us?
I want to do The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Ooh, cool. Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I saw that a couple years ago. I enjoyed that. That'll be a fun one to go back to.
All right.
Very cool. But yeah, that's going to do it for us. Tony, where can people find your comic or your work in general if they'd like to check out Serious Creatures or some of your books that you've written?
Thanks. You can find it at TonyMcMillan.com or on Instagram under Tony McMillan, or Facebook also under Tony McMillan. No one has my name, apparently. It's great. All my stuff's there. I have a novel called An Augmented Fourth, which is actually like Black Sabbath meets The Thing. It's very indebted to The Thing. So if you're into The Thing, you might want to check out that novel as well.
Very cool. Very cool. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll have
Congrats on 20 episodes. That's amazing.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. We'll have to have you back the next time we do a Rob Bottin movie.
I'm down.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for checking out the show. If you'd like to check out other shows that we might have under our umbrella, we have the Penske File podcast where Wes and I talk about Star Trek. We're currently doing double duty with Star Trek Enterprise and the new Lower Decks cartoon that's just come out. We've also got the Badass podcast where myself and DC Comics artist Sean Murphy talk about Batman the Animated Series. And there's a host of other bits and pieces of shows that we've done here and there that we got a lot of stuff is what I'm saying. So if you like this, feel free to check that stuff out. It'd be much appreciated. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, everyone. If you want to check out Tony's comic Serious Creatures, he is currently, as of the premiere of this episode, running a Kickstarter campaign to help fund the publishing of the first collected edition, which I think is the first 6 issues or so, all in one book. So head over to Kickstarter.com and search for Serious Creatures by Tony McMillan. And if you like what you see, maybe throw him a couple dollars. Thanks, guys.